Hello guys. Imagine waking up thousands of years ago, with no alarm, no electricity, no supermarket, and nowhere you need to be by 9. The fire is fading, the air is cool, and people around you are slowly waking up. But what did early humans actually do all day? Before we find out, get comfortable, relax your shoulders, and let the day fade away. And if you enjoy these quiet journeys through history, consider subscribing. Now, let's wake up with the sun, thousands of years ago. The first thing you notice is the light. Not an alarm. Not the sudden glow of a phone screen. Not a voice telling you that you've already hit snooze twice. Just light. Very slowly, the darkness around you begins to soften. You're lying close to the ground, perhaps on a simple layer of grass, leaves, hide, or whatever natural materials your group has gathered for sleeping. The surface beneath you isn't exactly comfortable by modern standards, but after a long night, your body has learned to accept it. The air is cool. You can smell yesterday's fire. A faint trace of smoke still hangs around the shelter, mixed with the earthy smell of the ground and the people sleeping nearby. Someone moves. A child makes a small sound. Another person shifts beneath whatever covering they have. And somewhere outside, birds have already decided that morning has officially begun. You open your eyes. For a few seconds, you simply lie there. There is nowhere you need to be. No meeting. No school bus. No train to catch. No notification waiting for you. You don't even know what time it is. Because there is no clock. For early humans, the beginning of the day was deeply connected to the natural world. Light gradually changed the environment, temperatures shifted, animals became active, and people could begin moving around again. And this is where our modern imagination can sometimes get things wrong. When we picture prehistoric people, we tend to imagine them waking up and immediately rushing into some dangerous task. Perhaps a dramatic hunt. Perhaps a desperate search for food. Perhaps some enormous struggle against the wilderness. But real life is rarely that dramatic. Your ancient morning probably begins with much smaller things. Someone has to check the fire. Someone has to prepare food. Someone may need to collect water. Children need attention. Tools might need to be moved or repaired. And eventually, everyone has to figure out what the day is going to look like. In other words, you wake up and do something remarkably familiar. You start your morning. The difference is that almost everything around you requires more physical effort. Imagine reaching for a cup of water. Today, perhaps there's a bottle sitting beside your bed. You pick it up. You drink. Done. For an early human, water might have required an actual journey. The same is true of food. There is no refrigerator waiting nearby. No cupboard filled with packaged meals. No bakery opening down the street. Food exists somewhere in the landscape, and knowing where to find it is part of knowing how to live. That knowledge could be incredibly detailed. An experienced person might know which plants appear during a particular season, where water can usually be found, where animals tend to travel, and which areas are worth visiting at different times of year. To you, the landscape might look like an endless stretch of wilderness. To them, it could be more like a familiar neighborhood. That tree means something. That river bend means something. That rocky slope means something. That particular patch of plants means something. The environment wasn't simply a background. It was a source of information. And much of that information had to be remembered. There were no maps on your phone. No search engine. No GPS voice calmly announcing that you had arrived at your destination. You carried the map inside your head, and children learned this world by watching the people around them. They watched where adults went. They watched what they touched. They learned what was useful and what wasn't. They learned through imitation, play, observation, and eventually participation. This meant that even a quiet morning could contain a great deal of learning. A child might sit near an adult working with a tool. They might watch food being prepared. They might follow someone toward a water source. They didn't necessarily think of this as education. It was simply life. And perhaps that's one of the biggest differences between their world and ours. Today, we separate life into categories: school, work, exercise, entertainment, family time, sleep. For early humans, those boundaries were much less clear. Learning could happen while walking. Work could happen while talking. Food gathering could become social time. Rest could happen while repairing a tool. And conversation could carry important knowledge from one generation to another. There is still a lot we don't know. Archaeology can show us tools, bones, hearths, shelters, food remains, and other traces of ancient life. But it cannot tell us exactly what every person thought when they woke up. We can't know whether someone thousands of years ago opened their eyes and thought, "I really don't want to get up today." But honestly, considering how long humans have been human, it would be surprising if nobody ever felt that way. Maybe mornings were sometimes slow. Maybe someone complained. Maybe someone else was already impatient. Maybe a child wanted to keep sleeping. Those tiny details are lost. And that's what makes reconstructing ancient daily life so fascinating. We can see the evidence of what people needed to do, but the little emotions inside those moments are mostly invisible. Still, the basic rhythm is clear. Morning arrives. People wake. The fire needs attention. Food needs to be found. Water needs to be collected. Children need care. The group begins to move. And gradually, the quiet of the night gives way to the ordinary sounds of another day. Footsteps outside. Voices. The crackle of burning wood. The movement of people preparing themselves. Perhaps the smell of something beginning to cook. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing worthy of a monument. Just another morning. And that may be the most important thing to remember. Early humans weren't living through one enormous adventure after another. Most of their lives were made from ordinary mornings like this one. They woke up. They looked around. They took care of what needed taking care of. And then they began the day. Just as you did this morning. Only without the alarm clock. By now, the morning has fully arrived. The fire is burning again, people are moving around, and sooner or later, there is one problem nobody can ignore. You're hungry. For us, breakfast can be almost effortless. You open the refrigerator. You pour some cereal. You make coffee. Maybe you grab something from the kitchen and sit down while checking your phone. For early humans, food was rarely waiting in a neat little package. You had to know where it was. And finding it could become one of the main activities of the day. Perhaps you're walking with a few other people through a familiar stretch of land. The morning air is still cool. Your feet move over dirt, stones, and patches of grass. You aren't necessarily searching randomly. You already know this landscape. You know where certain plants grow. You know where water can be found. You may recognize signs left behind by animals. To someone unfamiliar with the area, it might look like nothing more than trees, rocks, and empty ground. But to you, every part of it contains information. That knowledge was incredibly valuable. A particular plant might be ready to eat at one time of year and useless at another. A certain place might attract animals. A water source might be reliable during one season but disappear during another. The landscape changed constantly, and people had to pay attention. This is where the idea of the prehistoric human as a person who simply wandered around looking for food begins to fall apart. Finding food required memory, observation, experience, and cooperation. Some people could be particularly skilled at recognizing edible plants. Others might understand animal tracks. Others might know how to process food once it had been collected. And these skills could be learned over many years. So imagine carrying that knowledge with you as you walk. The sun is slowly getting warmer. Your stomach is reminding you why you're here. You find something useful. Maybe it's a plant. Maybe fruit. Maybe nuts or seeds. Perhaps you found evidence that animals passed through recently. You stop. You look. You listen. And then you continue. There is no supermarket aisle where everything has already been sorted by category. No bright labels telling you exactly what something contains. No expiration date. The natural world is your pantry. And it doesn't always cooperate. Some days could be productive. Other days could be much harder. Weather could change. Animals could move elsewhere. Plants could become scarce. A dry period could make water difficult to find. This uncertainty was part of life. But it is important not to imagine every morning as an emergency. Humans were remarkably adaptable. They learned their environments. They adjusted their diets. They changed their movements. They developed different ways of gathering, hunting, fishing, processing, and storing food. And sometimes, after all that searching, breakfast might be surprisingly simple. A little food. Some water, perhaps something cooked over the fire. Then you sit for a while. You eat slowly. You talk. Someone nearby may be watching a child. Someone else might be preparing for the next task. And suddenly, something about this ancient breakfast feels familiar. Because food has never been only about survival. It has always been social. Even today, some of our favorite memories involve eating with other people. A family breakfast. Coffee with a friend. A late-night meal. A conversation around a table. Early humans didn't have dining rooms or kitchen tables in the modern sense, but the basic human experience was already there. People gathered. They shared food. They talked. They watched one another. And after breakfast, there was still plenty left to do. The day was only beginning. For now, though, imagine sitting beside that ancient fire, feeling the warmth on your hands, with the morning air still cool around you. You have eaten. You're no longer hungry. And somewhere beyond the shelter, the landscape is waiting. So you stand up. Brush the dust from your hands. And begin the next part of your day. With breakfast behind you, the day begins to settle into its rhythm. There is no official workday. No boss waiting somewhere. No clock telling you that you have 8 hours left. But there are still things that need to be done. A tool may need repairing. Wood may need collecting. Food may need preparing. Something around the shelter may need fixing. And someone has to do it. This is where ancient life becomes surprisingly familiar. A large part of your day is made up of small jobs. You might sit down with a piece of stone and carefully shape it into something useful. Tap. Turn. Tap again. A sharp edge slowly appears. It isn't dramatic. There are no special effects. Just patience and repeated movements. Another person might be working with wood, fibers, animal hides, or food. Someone else could be carrying water or gathering fuel for the fire. And because there are no machines to do these things for you, ordinary objects require time. Think about something as simple as clothing. Today, you can buy a shirt in minutes. For early humans, producing useful coverings could involve finding materials, preparing them, cutting or shaping them, and turning them into something that could actually be worn. Even firewood wasn't simply there when you needed it. It had to be found, collected, carried, and eventually burned. This meant that survival wasn't always about dramatic moments. Often, it was maintenance. Keeping things working. Keeping things clean enough. Keeping food available. Keeping the shelter useful. And keeping the fire alive. That last one matters more than it might seem. The fire could provide warmth, light, and a way to cook food. So throughout the day, someone might pay attention to it. Not constantly, but often enough to make sure it didn't disappear. And here's something that might surprise you. Not everyone in the group necessarily spent the day doing the same thing. Age, experience, physical ability, and skill all mattered. A child couldn't perform every task an experienced adult could. An older person might not travel as far, but could possess valuable knowledge. Someone might be especially good at making tools. Someone else might know the landscape almost instinctively. Someone else might be better at finding certain foods. So the ancient day wasn't simply about individual survival. It was about people contributing in different ways. And that brings us back to something you saw earlier this morning. The group. The people around you. Your breakfast wasn't just food. Your walk wasn't just movement. And now, your work isn't just work. You're part of a network of people who depend on one another. You might spend part of the afternoon repairing something while talking to someone beside you. A child might be watching. Someone might be laughing. Someone might be telling a story. The task itself could be repetitive, but the company could make it feel very different. Modern life separates these things quite sharply. We go to work. Then we go home. Then we exercise. Then we relax. Then we spend time with family. For early humans, those categories could overlap constantly. Work could become conversation. Learning could happen during work. Childcare could happen while gathering food. And rest could happen while repairing a tool. There were no neat boxes. Just life moving from one activity to another. Of course, not every task was easy. Some could be physically demanding. An injury could make ordinary work much harder. A shortage of food could increase the pressure. A broken tool could become a real inconvenience. But there were also moments when nothing needed immediate attention. You could sit down, breathe, look around, listen to the people nearby. The sun is higher now. The morning chill is disappearing. And the work continues quietly around you. No deadlines. No notifications. Just one small task after another. And perhaps that's what early humans really did for much of the day. They didn't constantly chase extraordinary experiences. They simply kept life moving, one tool, one meal, one fire, one small task at a time. And somewhere between all those little jobs, there was still plenty of time for something else. People, conversation, children, and perhaps even a little rest. As the day moves on, you begin to notice something. You're almost never alone. There are people nearby wherever you go. Someone is preparing food. Someone is working with a tool. Someone is carrying something back toward the shelter. And somewhere close by, children are watching everything. For early humans, Children learned very differently from the way most children learn today. There was no classroom waiting for them. No homework. No school bell. No teacher standing at a board. Instead, the world around them was the classroom. A child might watch an adult collecting plants and slowly learn which ones were useful. They might watch someone make a tool. They might follow older children as they explored the area. And much of this learning probably happened through imitation. You watch. You try. You make a mistake. You watch again. Then, eventually, you become better. It sounds simple, but this kind of learning was incredibly important. Knowing how to find food, recognize danger, use tools, understand the landscape, and cooperate with others could make a real difference. And children weren't simply sitting around waiting to become adults. They were part of the group. Their responsibilities would change with age, but they could gradually begin helping with simple tasks. Perhaps carrying something small. Gathering nearby materials. Watching younger children. Following adults and paying attention. At the same time, older people had an important place too. Someone who had lived through many seasons could remember things that younger people had never experienced. Where food appeared during a difficult year. Which route was safer, when certain animals usually moved through an area. Where water could be found. That kind of knowledge doesn't look impressive sitting on a modern resume. But in an ancient landscape, it could be priceless. And then there was something else. Conversation. Imagine sitting near the people around you while work continues. Someone is shaping a tool. Someone is preparing food. A child is playing nearby. And people are talking. We can't know exactly what prehistoric conversation sounded like. Archaeology can give us objects and traces of behavior, but it cannot preserve an ordinary conversation from thousands of years ago. Still, human beings have always been intensely social. So it is difficult to imagine that ancient life was completely silent and serious. There were probably stories, questions, arguments, laughter, warnings, advice, and, almost certainly, moments when somebody was simply being annoying. Because technology changes, human personalities seem much harder to get rid of. You can imagine someone working beside you while you quietly think, "Could you please stop doing that?" And perhaps another person nearby is thinking exactly the same thing about you. These little social moments may seem unimportant, but they are part of what made group living possible. People had to cooperate. They had to share information. They had to care for children. They had to help injured members of the group. They had to recognize who could be trusted. And they also had to deal with disagreements. Modern humans have complicated ways of doing that. Ancient humans had their own. We simply don't know all the details. And that's an important uncertainty to keep in mind. There wasn't one universal ancient family structure. Different human societies lived in different environments and probably organized relationships in different ways. But the basic need for connection was already there. You needed other people, and other people needed you. So as the afternoon continues, your day isn't really a list of separate tasks anymore. You're gathering food while talking. You're working while watching children. You're resting while listening to someone tell a story. Everything overlaps. And for a moment, the ancient world feels less distant. Because underneath the stone tools and unfamiliar landscape, there are simply people. People looking after each other. People learning. People laughing. People getting tired. People trying to make it through another ordinary day together. And perhaps, after all that movement and work, the next thing you need is something very simple. A little time to do nothing at all. They had to help injured members of the group. They had to recognize who could be trusted. And they also had to deal with disagreements. Modern humans have complicated ways of doing that. Ancient humans had their own. We simply don't know all the details. And that's an important uncertainty to keep in mind. There wasn't one universal ancient family structure. Different human societies lived in different environments and probably organized relationships in different ways. But the basic need for connection was already there. You needed other people, and other people needed you. So as the afternoon continues, your day isn't really a list of separate tasks anymore. You're gathering food while talking. You're working while watching children. You're resting while listening to someone tell a story. Everything overlaps. And for a moment, the ancient world feels less distant. Because underneath the stone tools and unfamiliar landscape, there are simply people. People looking after each other. People learning. People laughing. People getting tired. People trying to make it through another ordinary day together. And perhaps, after all that movement and work, the next thing you need is something very simple. A little time to do nothing at all. And now, for a little while, nothing needs to happen. The food has been gathered. The fire is burning. The important tasks are under control. So you sit. Maybe you're beside the fire, feeling its warmth against your skin while the afternoon air moves quietly around you. There is no phone in your hand. No screen waiting to entertain you. No message asking for a reply. No clock reminding you that you're wasting time. You simply sit. And this may be one of the most surprising parts of imagining early human life. They had leisure. The old image of prehistoric people working every waking minute just to survive is too simple. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have found that daily life could include substantial periods of rest and leisure, although the amount varied greatly between communities and environments. So perhaps your afternoon isn't filled with constant effort. Maybe someone nearby is repairing a tool. Someone else is talking. A child is playing. Another person is simply lying in the shade. The fire makes a soft crackling sound. A breeze moves through the grass. And for once, nobody is asking you to do anything. Modern life can make this feeling strangely uncomfortable. If we have 5 empty minutes, we often fill them. We check our phones. We open another app. We watch something. We scroll. We search. We give our attention away before we even realize we've done it. For an early human, there was no endless stream of information waiting in their pocket. Boredom was possible. And perhaps boredom wasn't always a bad thing. When nothing urgent was happening, you might talk. You might tell stories. You might play a simple game. You might watch someone work. You might simply look around. The clouds move slowly across the sky. A bird calls somewhere in the distance. The fire shifts and collapses slightly. Someone laughs. And then the conversation continues. This doesn't mean ancient people were constantly relaxed. Life could still be physically demanding. Weather could be harsh. Food could become scarce. Illness and injury could be serious. But between those moments of necessity, there was room to breathe. And that room matters. Because human beings don't only need food and shelter. We need social connection. We need moments of rest. We need time when our minds aren't solving a problem. Perhaps that is why sitting around an ancient fire feels so strangely familiar. Even today, people gather around campfires. They sit outside at night. They talk for hours without any particular purpose. Someone tells a story they've already told before. Someone else laughs anyway. Nobody is trying to be productive. Nobody needs to be. And maybe your ancient afternoon looked much the same. The work would continue later. The food could wait for a little while. The sun was still high. So you rested. You might even close your eyes for a moment. Not because you were lazy. Because rest was part of the rhythm. And as you sit there, you realize something else. The day is moving without you having to control it. The sun slowly crosses the sky. The shadows become longer. The air begins to cool. You haven't checked the time because there is no time to check. You simply know that afternoon is becoming evening, and eventually, when the light begins to fade, you'll have another set of small things to do. The fire will need attention. Food will need preparing. People will begin gathering together again. But for now, nothing is urgent. So you sit a little longer. You listen to the fire. You feel the warmth. And let the ancient afternoon pass quietly by. By now, the sun has moved across the sky. The warmth of the morning has settled into the landscape, and the group begins moving again. Maybe you need water. Maybe you're looking for more food. Maybe you're checking a familiar area. Or perhaps you're simply traveling toward another place where the group plans to spend the evening. Whatever the reason, walking is a normal part of your day. Not exercise. Not a weekend activity. Just life. Your feet touch the ground again and again. Dirt. Stone. Grass. Maybe mud. You feel the slope beneath you and notice how the landscape changes as you move. For an early human, distance was something your body experienced directly. Today, you can travel several miles while sitting comfortably in a car. You can cross an entire country without ever feeling the ground beneath your feet. Your ancient walk is different. If you're carrying food, water, tools, or other materials, you feel every bit of the weight. You also learn the landscape through your body. You know which paths are easier, which areas are steep, where water can usually be found, where animals might pass, and where it is better not to go. To someone unfamiliar with the area, the landscape might look almost empty. But to you, it isn't empty at all. You recognize things. A particular tree. A familiar rock. A distant hill. A patch of plants. These places become part of your mental map. And that map isn't stored on a phone. It's stored in memory. Generations of knowledge can be connected to the same landscape. Someone older may have shown you the route. You may have walked it many times, and one day, perhaps you'll show it to someone younger. That is how knowledge survives. Not through a printed guide. Through people. Through repetition. Through walking. Of course, walking isn't always comfortable. The ground can be rough. The sun can be strong. Your feet can become tired. A heavy load can slowly make your shoulders ache. And if you're traveling a long distance, the journey can become exhausting. This is one of those moments when the comfort of your own room becomes very noticeable. Right now, you can probably shift your legs beneath a blanket. You can stretch. You can take a drink of water. You can stop the story whenever you want. Your ancient self doesn't have quite the same options. Still, there is something beautiful about the simplicity of the movement. You aren't trying to reach 10,000 steps. You aren't wearing a fitness watch. You aren't checking your pace. You're simply going somewhere. And as you walk, there is time to notice things. The sound of insects. The wind moving through leaves. Birds calling from somewhere above. The occasional crack of a branch beneath someone's foot. Maybe people are talking as they walk. Maybe children are following nearby. Maybe for a while nobody says anything. There doesn't need to be constant conversation. The landscape provides enough sound. And gradually, the afternoon begins to change. The sun isn't quite as high anymore. The shadows stretch farther across the ground. The heat begins to soften. You can feel that evening is approaching. Perhaps the group is beginning to turn back toward the shelter. The day's main work is slowly coming to an end. There will still be food to prepare. There will still be a fire to tend. There will still be people to gather around. But the long movement of the afternoon is almost finished. You take a final look across the landscape. Nothing looks dramatically different, yet you have traveled through it, noticed it, remembered it. And now, with the light slowly becoming softer, you begin the journey back. Toward the fire. Toward the people. Toward the quietest part of the day. The walk is over now. The sun is beginning to drop lower, and the warmth of the afternoon is slowly leaving the air. You can feel that the day is changing. There is still work to do, but the feeling is different now. Less movement. Less urgency. More preparation for the night ahead. Perhaps food has been brought back to the shelter. It needs to be cleaned, prepared, and cooked. Someone gathers more wood for the fire. Someone checks the shelter. Children begin staying closer to the adults. And slowly, everyone starts coming together again. For early humans, evening was an important transition. Modern life has made darkness almost irrelevant. We can switch on a light at any moment. We can stay awake until 2 in the morning while watching television or scrolling through a phone. But for early humans, darkness was much more powerful. When the sun disappeared, the world became genuinely dark. A fire could push that darkness back a little. Its warm light could illuminate faces, hands, and the ground immediately around you. But beyond that small circle of light, the night remained. You could hear things without being able to see them. The wind moving through the trees. An animal somewhere in the distance. The soft movement of people nearby. And perhaps that made the fire feel even more important. It wasn't just a way to cook dinner. It was warmth, light, comfort, and a place for people to gather. Imagine sitting close to it now. You can feel the heat against your face. The smoke drifts upward. Someone places another piece of wood onto the fire. It catches slowly. A few sparks rise into the darkness. Around you, people begin talking. The day's events might be discussed. Someone may remember something that happened earlier. Children may listen to older people. Stories may be told. And this kind of storytelling could have been much more important than simple entertainment. Without books, television, or the internet, Spoken stories could carry knowledge from one generation to another. They could preserve memories, explain places, teach lessons, remember important people, and perhaps simply make the evening more enjoyable. We can't know exactly what every ancient conversation sounded like. That part of human life has mostly disappeared. Archaeology can show us ancient fires and objects, but it cannot preserve the sound of a person's voice around the fire thousands of years ago. Still, you can imagine the atmosphere. A quiet conversation, a sudden laugh, a child asking a question, someone speaking while another person works with their hands. The fire crackles between them, and gradually, the sky becomes completely dark. The stars become easier to see. There are no streetlights washing them away. No buildings glowing in the distance. Just the night sky above you. For a modern person, that sky might feel enormous. For someone who lived beneath it every night, it was simply part of life. And as the evening continues, you begin to feel tired. Your body has walked, carried things, worked, gathered food, moved through the landscape. Your hands have been busy all day. Now they can finally become still. The fire continues burning. The voices slowly become quieter. The day that began with the first pale light is finally coming to an end. Soon, there will be nothing left to prepare. Nothing left to carry. Nothing left to fix. Only the night, and the simple promise that tomorrow, when the light returns, another ordinary day will begin. The fire is getting quieter now. The bright flames have become smaller, and the warm circle of light around the shelter is slowly shrinking. The voices have softened. The day's work is finished. And your body is tired. You have walked, carried things, worked with your hands, spent hours moving through the landscape. Now, there is nothing left that needs to be done. So you begin preparing to sleep. For early humans, there was no modern bedroom waiting at the end of the day. No soft mattress. No perfectly adjusted temperature. No blackout curtains. No alarm clock waiting to pull you awake in the morning. Your sleeping place was probably made from whatever materials were available in the environment, perhaps leaves, grass, hides, or other natural materials. You settle down. You can feel the ground beneath you. The air is cooler now. The smell of smoke is still nearby. Someone else is already getting comfortable. A child moves closer to an adult. And slowly, the group becomes quiet. This is where the ancient night feels very different from ours. Today, darkness doesn't have to change our behavior very much. We can turn on a lamp. We can open a laptop. We can watch a movie at midnight. We can stay awake long after the sun has disappeared. For early humans, darkness was much harder to ignore. Fire provided some light, but only a limited amount. Beyond that warm little circle, the night remained dark. You could hear things without seeing them. The wind, the movement of animals, branches shifting somewhere outside, rain beginning to fall. Every sound might have been familiar. or it might have made you pause for a moment. We should be careful, though, not to imagine that every ancient night was filled with fear. Humans adapted to their environments. They knew the places where they lived. They knew the sounds around them. And sleeping near other people could provide warmth, companionship, and a sense of security. Sleep itself is one of the oldest human experiences. Long before bedrooms, pillows, clocks, and comfortable blankets, people still had to close their eyes and rest. And that part of the story is surprisingly familiar. You are tired. You have finished everything that needs to be finished. There is no reason to keep working. So you lie down. Perhaps you listen to the fire for a while. The sound becomes softer. The warmth reaches you less strongly. Your breathing slows. The people around you become quiet. And gradually, your attention begins to drift. We don't know exactly how every early human group slept. Sleep patterns could have varied with environment, culture, season, age, and other circumstances. There was no single prehistoric bedtime that everyone followed. But one thing is certain. They needed sleep just as we do. And perhaps that is the most comforting thought of all. Thousands of years can separate two people. Different food. Different homes. Different tools. Different worlds. But when both become tired, the body asks for the same thing. Rest. So imagine that ancient shelter becoming quieter. The last sounds of conversation disappear. The fire settles into glowing embers. Outside, the night continues without interruption. There is no screen. No notification. Nothing asking for your attention. Only darkness. Cool air. Warmth from the fading fire. And the slow rhythm of breathing around you. For a while, tomorrow doesn't matter. The next meal doesn't matter. The next journey doesn't matter. The work can wait. The landscape can wait. Everything can wait until morning. And eventually, you let your eyes close. Just as countless human beings had done before you. And just as countless would do after you. The ancient day is finally over. But there are still two things left to understand. What did an ordinary human day really mean? And why does that ancient rhythm still feel strangely familiar to us now? Now that the night has settled around you, it's worth looking back at the day. Not as one dramatic prehistoric adventure. Just as a day. You woke with the light. You tended the fire. You found food. You walked. You worked. You watched children. You talked with other people. You rested when there was nothing urgent to do. Then you prepared for the evening and finally went to sleep. That rhythm might sound simple. But simple doesn't mean empty. In fact, most of human history was probably made from days that looked something like this. We often imagine history through its biggest moments. Great migrations. Important discoveries. Battles. Climate changes. The rise and fall of civilizations. But for the person actually living through those periods, most days probably weren't about any of those things. Most days were ordinary. You woke up. You ate. You worked. You talked. You waited. You rested. Then you did it all again. And this is something we can relate to more than we might expect. Think about your own life. How many days do you remember clearly? Probably not very many. You might remember birthdays, trips, important conversations, a few difficult days, a few wonderful ones. But most ordinary Tuesdays disappear almost completely. You wake up. You work. You eat. You check your phone. You talk to someone. You do a few chores. Then evening arrives. And suddenly it's time for bed again. Early humans had their own version of this repetition. Their surroundings were completely different, but repetition was still part of life. Food gathering happened again. Fire had to be maintained again. Tools eventually needed attention again. Water had to be found again. Children needed care again. And eventually, another morning would come. Of course, we should remember that there was never one universal prehistoric routine. Early humans lived across enormous stretches of time and in many different environments. A person living near a coast could have a very different daily rhythm from someone living far inland. A group in a cold region had different challenges from a group living somewhere warm. Some people moved frequently. Others returned to familiar places. So when we talk about early humans, we're really talking about many different human lives. Still, underneath those differences, there were common needs. Food, water, shelter, warmth, social connection, rest, and perhaps that is the simplest answer to our original question. What did early humans actually do all day? They did whatever was necessary to keep life going. And when everything necessary had been done, they lived. They talked. They played. They rested. They watched the world around them. They spent time with other people. They experienced boredom. They laughed. They probably worried about tomorrow. They probably looked forward to certain things. They probably had good days and bad days. And they probably had days when absolutely nothing memorable happened. That last part is easy to forget, but it may be the most human part of the entire story. Because a life isn't made only from important moments. It is mostly made from ordinary ones. A meal that you barely remember. A walk you didn't think was important. A conversation that seemed small at the time. An afternoon spent doing almost nothing. A quiet evening beside a fire. Then sleep. And then another day. Thousands of years later, our world is almost unimaginably different. We have electricity, cars, airplanes, phones, supermarkets, buildings filled with artificial light. We can speak to someone on the other side of the planet in seconds. And yet, underneath all of that, our bodies still follow an ancient rhythm. We become hungry. We become tired. We need warmth. We need other people. We need periods when nothing is expected from us. And eventually, we need to sleep. Maybe that is why the ancient day doesn't feel quite as distant as it should. And perhaps, after everything we've imagined, the most interesting part is this. The ancient day wasn't as strange as it first seemed. Yes, the world was completely different. There were no cities, no electricity, no supermarkets, no cars waiting outside. But the basic rhythm of being human was already there. You woke up because morning arrived. You became hungry. You looked for food. You worked with your hands. You walked. You spent time with other people. You cared for children. You rested when you could. And eventually, when the light disappeared, you went to sleep. It sounds almost too simple. But perhaps that's exactly why it feels familiar. Imagine returning to that same shelter from the beginning of our story. The fire is burning softly again. Someone is preparing food. A child is sitting nearby. Another person is repairing something with their hands. The day isn't dramatic. Nothing important is happening, and that's okay. There is no pressure to make every moment meaningful. No need to photograph it. No need to post about it. No need to turn an ordinary afternoon into something impressive. It is simply an afternoon. And perhaps this is something our modern world has made surprisingly difficult. We are constantly encouraged to do more, work more, learn more, exercise more, watch more, read more, respond faster, stay informed, stay connected, keep moving. But early human life reminds us that a day can contain empty spaces, spaces where nothing particularly important happens, and those spaces aren't necessarily wasted. Sometimes they are, where life actually happens. A conversation beside a fire, a quiet walk, a child playing nearby, a few minutes spent watching the sky, a meal shared with other people, the feeling of warmth after being outside in the cold. These moments may never become part of history books, but they are still part of a human life. And perhaps early humans understood that without ever needing to put it into words. Their world demanded a lot from them. Food wasn't guaranteed. Weather could be unpredictable. Injury could be dangerous. The landscape could be difficult. But between those demands, there was still room for laughter, rest, curiosity, affection, boredom, and sleep. That balance may be one of the oldest parts of being human. So when we ask what early humans actually did all day, the answer isn't simply hunting or gathering. They lived. They maintained their world. They looked after one another. They learned. They rested, they waited, they talked, they ate and they slept, just like generations before them and generations after them. The remarkable thing is that most of those people never knew they were living through what we would eventually call history. To them, it was simply Tuesday, or whatever their equivalent of an ordinary day happened to be. They weren't thinking about how fascinating their lives would seem thousands of years later. They were simply trying to get through the day. And then another day came, and another, and another, until slowly, over an enormous stretch of time, those ordinary days became our shared human story. So perhaps tonight, when you think about your own day, you don't need to judge it by how much you accomplished. Maybe it was productive, maybe it wasn't. Maybe you worked for hours. Maybe you spent part of the afternoon doing almost nothing. Maybe you had a good conversation. Maybe you were tired. Maybe nothing particularly memorable happened. That's okay. A day doesn't need to become a story to be worth living. For thousands of generations, human beings simply woke up, lived through an ordinary day, and went to sleep. And somehow, that was enough. Now the ancient fire is becoming smaller again. The voices around it are fading. The landscape is disappearing into darkness, and the same quiet rhythm that carried those distant people towards sleep can carry you there too. There's nothing else you need to accomplish tonight. The day is finished. You can let it go, and slowly, gently, you can rest. Now, let the day become quiet. The ancient fire is almost gone. Only a few soft embers remain beneath the ash, glowing gently in the darkness. The people around you have stopped talking. The tools have been set aside. The food has been eaten. The walking's finished. There's nothing left that needs to be done. So for a little while, you can simply rest. Imagine the shelter around you becoming softer and darker. The cool night air moves quietly outside. Somewhere in the distance, there may be the faint sound of an animal, the movement of leaves, or the gentle shifting of the wind. But you don't need to know what it is. You don't need to follow every sound. Just let it pass. The same world that was busy this morning has become still again. The sunlight that woke you has disappeared. The landscape has faded into darkness, and the fire that once gave warmth and light is slowly becoming nothing more than a few quiet points of red beneath the ash. Perhaps this is the simplest thing humans have always shared. Morning comes, we wake, we spend the day doing what needs to be done. We eat, we walk, we work, we talk, we rest, and eventually we become tired enough to let everything go. Thousands of years ago, someone may have closed their eyes beneath a sky filled with stars without knowing that one day people would look back and wonder what their ordinary day was like. They didn't know they were making history. They were simply living. And perhaps that is enough. So tonight, you don't need to accomplish anything more. Whatever happened today can remain where it belongs. Tomorrow can wait quietly in the distance. For now, there's only this moment, the warmth beneath the blanket, the softness of the darkness, the slow rhythm of your breathing. Let your shoulders become a little heavier. Let your hands relax. Let your thoughts move more slowly. And if your mind wanders, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to bring it back. Let the thoughts drift past like distant clouds. The ancient landscape is quiet now. The fire is almost completely dark. The people nearby are sleeping, and somewhere beyond the shelter, beneath the enormous night sky, the world continues turning slowly. You can let yourself become part of that quiet rhythm. No clocks, no schedules, no notifications, no need to hurry. Just night, just rest, just the gentle passing of time. And as the final warmth of the ancient fire disappears into the darkness, you can allow your own day to disappear with it. The morning will come when it is ready, but for now, you can simply close your eyes, breathe slowly, and rest.